when Leona parted ways with Rockfried. In front of the border guard's wall, a bodyguard named Mathis drew all eyes to himself in an instant. It was clearly intentional. It was an aura.
Killing intent becomes aura. Once the sixth sense opens, it can be done. It's easy. Oh, it might be a bit difficult for the platoon leader.
That crazy Jackson bastard, anyway. His words are sharp. It's as if his tongue was forged in a blacksmith's shop. There's a knife in his words. Not that Enkrid cared much about it. He just brushed it off, thinking he's a crazy bastard. In the end, Jackson was right. The sixth sense had opened. Even though Enkrid had used something similar to an aura during a mission to catch a cat, it was hard to make it a part of him. But this time, he got the hang of it again. Once he relaxed his shoulders, it was easier than he thought, and so he ended up using it. When he told Torres and Finn to be careful, Enkrid raised his aura, and now...
Move aside, I'll lure the rest.
What?
Finn reacted.
What nonsense is this?
Torres reacted as well. Enkrid hadn't known Finn for long, and Torres wasn't much different, so they weren't at the level of risking their lives for each other.
Damn, Rangers don't abandon their comrades.
Neither do I.
But why were these two so eager? Finn and Torres had eyes that sparkled with a firm resolve. Yeah, you two are quite decent people, I get that.
But get lost, you're in the way.
Enkrid was cold. There was no time to explain everything. He had tried explaining in a different tone before, but they stuck around like ticks.
Why is this cool?
Then Finn muttered.
This bastard.
Torres was getting riled up, but they both understood his words. Enkrid was serious.
Wait at the maximum distance. Once this is over, regroup. I have a plan. We can all survive.
It was almost like a command. He had done this a few times. Showing resolve was better than explaining. There wasn't time to explain each detail. Soon.
See you later.
Torres spoke with a double meaning and then moved aside. Finn followed, looking back twice. As Enkrid watched them leave, he thought, even though they split up, all the enemies with spears had to come after him. How should he do that? He already knew the answer. Enkrid glanced back and shouted,
Roger, take off your helmet.
If anyone who knew nothing heard these words, they would find them meaningless.
Roger, you who first killed my hair and sent it to the sky.
Like a bard composing a poem, Enkrid shouted loudly. He had heard about what kind of person Roger was in 78 different realities. Although his bad relationship with Finn was for different reasons. Roger had earned the nickname, the commander who never removes his helmet. It was quite memorable. From his crown to his forehead, his head was a desert. That was his weak point.
Do you carry a barren wasteland on your head, where not a single blade of grass grows?
At first, Enkrid wondered if this would work. It was easy to confirm. In another reality, when he was captured by Roger, he happened to remove Roger's helmet.
Bald, huh?
He saw Roger's eyes turn wild at this single remark. To sum up, he needed to redirect the grudge against Finn onto himself.
I feel a bit sorry, though.
Enkrid casually ran his hand through his hair. His thick black hair slipped through his fingers, flaunting its presence.
That bastard.
Roger's eyes widened in anger. There was no doubt that if he were caught now, he wouldn't die peacefully. Torture would likely be the least of it. So, he must not be caught. Enkrid ran, and even as he saw Finn and Torres retreating, Roger commanded.
Catch him.
29 spear-wielding soldiers, filled with rage, rushed forward. Although they were furious now, in such a state, Roger would soon want to split up the men and drive spears into the necks of Finn and Torres as well.
Soon.
No sooner had he finished thinking. On the opposite side of Enkrid, from where the spearmen were, came the howling of a beast. The surroundings were bright because it was the night of a dual moon. The moonlight provided enough visibility to clearly see the beast charging from the opposite side. A lycanthrope, a creature with the head of a wolf, and running on 2 legs.
Whew.
Seeing this, Enkrid exhaled once to steady his breathing and stopped. This was the decisive moment. He had to tie up both the spearman and the lycanthrope.
Look at me.
The way to exude aura. It involves channeling the intent to kill into your entire body. It's about deciding that you can cut down and kill everyone present. The grip, sheathed in the scabbard, is grasped and slowly drawn. The blade reflects the moonlight as it emerges. Enkrid took a half-step forward with his right foot and conveyed with his whole body, "If you approach, I'll cut you down." Aura, killing intent, battle spirit. Expressed in words, It's clearly one of these, an invisible pressure spreading out. The intense aura was strong enough to make the entire spear-wielding unit and the charging lycanthrope forget about Torres and Finn, who had sidestepped. Drawn by this aura, the lycanthrope horde and the spear unit charged. At the center of it was Enkrid. It looked almost like a suicidal act. Roger was getting increasingly irritated. What should have been a simple task of catching one wildcat-like woman was getting strangely complicated. Should he just let her go? No. He wanted to catch and kill her. Wasn't she the one who killed his brother?
Damn it, chase them.
He was determined to catch and kill her. The moment he resolved to do so, Enkrid's shout erupted. From "take off your helmet" to "barren wasteland." Thump, his heart pounded. The anger rose, and it felt like his blood was boiling.
That bastard.
He made up his mind and resolved. When he caught that bastard, he wouldn't let him die easily. He would make him beg for death. In that moment, losing his reason, he shouted and ordered the chase. Roger himself started running when the howl of a beast burst out. The moment Roger saw the lycanthrope horde coming from the opposite side, frustration surged up.
Damn it.
How did things turn out like this?
That bastard.
It was because of that bastard's mocking poem about his baldness. He couldn't regain his composure because of that bastard's taunts.
Damn it.
Roger cursed at the lycanthropes, trying to steady his mind, but it wasn't easy, so what should he do? The decision was quick.
Kill them all.
The creature, whether it was called by Resha or whatever, was nothing more than a beast. If they formed a proper formation, they could handle even a colony of lycanthropes. It was at that moment, just as he was about to speak, having made up his mind. The pursuer, Enkrid, exhaled and then stopped, gripping his sword. He held his sword and spoke with his body, with his aura, with his intent to kill.
If you come closer, I'll cut you down.
In Roger's eyes, the surrounding background faded, leaving only the man with the drawn sword. If it looked like this to him, imagine how it appeared to the other soldiers. Despite their formation, they were overwhelmed by the aura, and thus the battle began. There were no orders to stop, so the spearmen at the front did what they always did, fight when they saw an enemy. And so, they thrust their spears with force. The claws of an approaching lycanthrope deflected the spear's blade, the discordant sound of the wolf's howl, claws, and spear shaft. At that sound, a cold streak of reason returned to Roger's mind.
Ah, damn.
They had attacked without properly forming a line. It was due to urgency. No, it was also because the enemy had mocked his weakness. The aura was also a problem. Things were tangled, and so chaos ensued. Huff! The first to reach Enkrid was the lycanthrope. Its claws targeted his neck. Watching its large arm movement, Enkrid stepped back.
Who?
He steadied his breathing. He couldn't afford to be out of breath now. From this point on, it was like walking a narrow path between cliffs. Not only was there no room for complacency, there was no room for mistakes. So, what was needed?
Boldness.
The heart of the beast beat strongly. The charging lycanthrope horde and the spearmen flanking them. Enemies surrounded him on all sides, but there was no reason for him to be anxious. After all, wasn't this the battlefield he had created?
So, what's next?
Sharpening his senses, he advanced beyond the realm of the five senses into the sixth sense. He had to dodge the claws or spearheads flying from behind. Enkrid did just that. Stepping forward with his left foot, he swung his sword sideways. Though it wasn't a powerful slash, it was enough to block the claws of the wolf that lunged at him from the side. He took a passing step to the side, pivoting on his left foot, a technique from the northern style. Ordinarily, at this point, he would follow up with a downward strike to break the arm or weapon of the attacker from behind.
Move forward again.
Instead, he bent forward. The wolf's claws brushed over his head. Enkrid's eyes were half closed, his vision was blurred. If someone looked closely, they would say his eyes resembled those of a fish out of water.
Focus.
Rather than concentrating on a single target, this was the method Enkrid chose to survive here.
Widen your focus.
He sharpened and spread his focus, encompassing the area around him where his sword could reach. The outcome of the battle would depend on judgment, distance, timing, and positioning. He judged in an instant. He gauged the distance between him and his opponent. He measured the time it took for his feet to move and the enemy's weapon to reach him. He calculated the time it took for his sword to reach its intended target. He became aware of his current position and where he would need to move next. With that, Enkrid danced alone in this battlefield. Occasionally, the lycanthrope's claws met his blade. A spearhead grazed the side of his gambeson. Claws narrowly missed his neck. There were even enemies who tried to step on his feet. Enkrid didn't cut anyone down. Even when an enemy nearly stepped on his foot, he only nudged them away with his shoulder. The result was
Gah!
a soldier's death cry. The soldier he pushed was bitten in the neck by a lycanthrope. Blood splattered, leaving a mark on the creature's face. It wasn't intentional. He dodged again and again. When a lycanthrope tried to bite his shoulder, he ducked. He heard the sound of the beast's jaws snapping shut and then pushed it away. This action was followed by a pained yelp from the creature. The result was a spear piercing the belly of the lycanthrope that had been targeting Enkrid. He focused on evasion rather than attack. As he slipped away along the outskirts of the battlefield, not the center, the lycanthropes had to deal with the humans wielding spears, and the spear unit had to fight off the lycanthropes. All of this was visible to Torres and Finn, who hadn't moved far away.
That.
He's crazy, completely crazy.
Torres and Finn spoke alternately. They stood frozen, forgetting the situation, their eyes fixed on Enkrid's movements. Enkrid dodged and dodged again. Sometimes he was hit by spear shafts or clawed by the lycanthropes, but he managed to avoid serious injuries. There were no fatal wounds. Most importantly, look at what he created from the center with a few words and raised aura. The fight between the beasts and the elite soldiers turned into a chaotic melee.
It seems like the humans might win.
The elite soldiers were still elite. Although their formation had broken, the soldiers grouped into 3s or 4s, covering each other's backs. This allowed them to recover some of the energy they had lost from the initial charge. They formed groups to block and stab with their shields. This strategy proved effective. Then Roger moved. He faced 3 or 4 lycanthropes alone, spearing one in the head and killing it. He fought with a short spear instead of a long one, like a tiger on a rampage.
If we leave him alone,
They saw him heading straight toward Enkrid. Finn knew without looking that Roger's eyes would be filled with malice. Roger always went berserk when mocked about his baldness.
crazy bastard.
We need to help him.
Torres shouted, seemingly making a decision. In the meantime, Roger, the enemy commander, charged fiercely, thrusting his spear toward Enkrid.
Ah,
Finn gasped, fearing the worst as it appeared that Enkrid had been pierced in the side.
Damn. No, he dodged it.
Torres corrected. He was right. It was a misunderstanding. Enkrid had trapped the spear under his arm and side while dodging. He had narrowly avoided the blow. It appeared to be a critical moment. At least it seemed so to Torres. Enkrid realized that his plan had worked. He had intended to create chaos on the battlefield. And now, behold the chaos-stricken battlefield. Today has become an exceptional day, one of the best among the many repeated Toe Days. It had turned into utter chaos, the most chaotic of all.
It's working.
He had instigated a melee, and it had resulted in a massacre of the lycanthropes. Although many soldiers had died as well, the soldiers, even if they had charged in recklessly, had the advantage of fighting in small groups with a minimum formation.
The soldiers will win.
While catching his breath at the edge of the chaos he had orchestrated, Roger charged at him. Roger lunged with his spear. The spearhead looking like a mere dot, it was a frightening thrust. Instead of making a large movement, Enkrid subtly twisted his body. His gambeson was already tattered, but he trusted in the sturdiness of his leather armor. A sharp swoosh and a ripping sound followed. The spearhead grazed his side. There was no sharp pain, indicating that the armor had held. Enkrid trapped the spear shaft against his side. Roger, seeing Enkrid holding the spear under his arm, applied force. He intended to yank the spear, a way to tear through Enkrid's arm and side. Holding the spearhead with your, I'll shred you apart. At the moment Roger applied force, a strange sound rang out, and a chill ran down his spine, causing him to tilt his head back. No, tilting his head wasn't enough. He bent backward at the waist. It was a display of incredible reflexes and agility.
Damn it.
A throwing knife whizzed past. grazing the hair on his head and the front of his helmet. The blade cut through the darkness in a long arc. Of course, he didn't actually see it, he sensed it. The chilling sensation quickly turned to anger. As Roger, fueled by his fiery rage, started to stand up, he felt a sudden lightness in the spear he held.
It's time to meet your hairs.
The voice came just as a shadow blocked the view above his head. It was Enkrid. He had already lunged and was descending from above.
This bastard.
Why is he so fast? Such agility did not match his size. The last image Roger saw was the descending blade. The blow split Roger's skull, cracking the helmet that had shielded his head. Blood and brain matter mixed and flowed from the split. Landing on the ground, Enkrid checked his body. He had grabbed the spear, thrown a whistle dagger at Roger's forehead, and then jumped forward for a vertical slash, all as he had planned.
Not bad.
There were no major injuries. His side was a bit sore from holding the spear earlier, but nothing serious. He felt around his ribs with his fingers.
Nothing's broken.
That's good. He might have some bruises.
Damn it, Captain.
An enemy soldier's shout was heard. Some enemy soldiers had witnessed Roger's death, but there was little they could do about it. Even if their eyes were bloodshot with anger, they couldn't abandon the lycanthropes they were fighting. The lycanthropes still bared their fangs menacingly at them. In any case, the outcome of the battle had become uncertain after this one strike. Roger's death seemed to have slightly dampened the spear unit's morale. Although they were still in a superior position, some soldiers were being killed by lycanthropes. It happened just now as well. A soldier, enraged by the sight of their leader's death, was struck in the head by a one-eyed lycanthrope that had been hiding. The one-eyed lycanthrope used its fist, not its claws. Instead of relying on instinct to use its claws and teeth, it fought with its fists. Yes, that level of skill was necessary to be the leader of a colony. Leaders of monster colonies are not just appointed to anyone. Not that it only used its fists, it also skillfully used the weapons attached to its body. The one-eyed lycanthrope struck down a few more soldiers, slashing spears and breaking a couple of shafts with its claws. After killing 2 more, it retreated behind its colony. It hid behind trees, behind enemy soldiers, and behind other lycanthropes. It aimed for ambushes, hiding and striking from the shadows. It had been using similar tactics from the start, constantly hiding in the darkness, ambushing and exploiting gaps. Enkrid gave up on finding the hidden creature among his troops and quietly caught his breath. During this time, a spearman charged at him.
Revenge.
Foolish words. Their leader had died in a one-on-one fight, so how did this one think they could succeed alone? If they had fought one-on-one from the start, they might have had a chance. That's why the chaos was created in the first place. Enkrid deflected the oncoming spear shaft with his sword and pushed his blade along the shaft. With a slicing sound, the blade stripped away the spear's outer layer and reached the soldier's neck. The well-sharpened blade cut through the enemy's neck. Blood spurted like a fountain from the half-severed neck. Enkrid followed through with the motion, using the centrifugal force to spin his body and set his sword in a ready position.
I was wondering when you'd come.
Behind Enkrid, near Roger's corpse, was a crouched lycanthrope. It was the leader of the lycanthrope pack, sneaking up behind him, the one-eyed lycanthrope. Its yellow eyes gleamed as it faced Enkrid.
Do you want to come first, or shall I?
The lycanthrope leader was indeed a more challenging opponent than Roger. However, Enkrid had never had an easy day in all of his 78 repetitions of today. It wasn't that he hadn't tried every time, even when he relaxed his shoulders, so he thought,
Let's finish this quickly.
He didn't find the idea of killing this creature particularly difficult. As the lycanthrope's claws sliced through the air, creating openings, the clash of claws and blade echoed. After several exchanges of offense and defense, Enkrid's sword severed the one-eyed lycanthrope's arm.
The advantage of weapons.
He had never felt it as strongly as he did now. The sword, forged with an investment of krona, shone brightly. It shattered the lycanthrope's claws every time it swung. In one of these openings, he cut the arm and seized the upper hand. The one-eyed lycanthrope swung its remaining claws from below, trying to split Enkrid in two. But Enkrid sidestepped and spun his body. He channeled the force from his foot, knee, and waist into the swing. delivering a powerful slash with his heavy sword technique. The blade, arcing through the moonlight, also sliced through the lycanthrope's neck. With a swish, the sword cut through without resistance, precisely striking the target and beheading the creature. The sound of the blade slicing through the air, the lycanthrope's head flying off, all happened in an instant. There was no moment of silence. There weren't many witnesses to this battle. If the spearmen had formed a formation and attacked, Enkrid might have died. It would have been the same if the lycanthrope pack had attacked in a formation. But in a one-on-one duel in the midst of chaos, he wouldn't lose. That was why he created this situation. Moreover, he had fought the one-eyed lycanthrope's leader several times, becoming familiar with its habits and fighting style. Of course, knowing its habits only mattered if he had the skill to back it up. As he spun half the turn, his sword outstretched, the moonlight seemed to whirl around Enkrid, creating an illusion of a vortex. It was just an illusion, of course. Enkrid subtly retreated. It was time to catch his breath. After all, today wasn't over yet. There was still a wall to climb. Hey, isn't that a bit strange? Was it always like this? He thought it was a crisis and started to rush, but he couldn't cross the battlefield directly, so he had to go around the side. Torres had seen Enkrid wield his sword to cut down Roger and decapitate the one-eyed lycanthrope, and he thought,
Has he changed?
coming this far, I've sparred with him dozens of times. The Enkrid back then was different from the Enkrid now.
What's changed?
Has his skill improved dramatically? That doesn't seem to be it.
His swordsmanship seems a bit colder.
He also seems more composed.
Was he always this skilled?
Finn asked from the side. It's a rare talent. Anyone watching would probably think the same.
He's incredibly skilled.
Admiring Enkrid's prowess, Finn's eyes sharpened and suddenly he stretched his left leg, planting it firmly on the ground, and kicked a small stone with his opposite foot. The stone, hitting his instep, flew upward. Finn caught it and while running, flung it sideways. The stone struck an enemy soldier in the back of the head with a sharp sound. At the moment the soldier lowered his head in response to the hit, a lycanthrope clawed at his back. The armor was sturdy, so it didn't penetrate completely in one hit. However, the soldier who had been hit had to roll aside to avoid further attacks, disrupting their formation. Two more lycanthropes exploited the gap and dove into the broken formation. Once the formation broke, the lycanthropes had a significant advantage. Torres glanced in that direction but quickly looked away. Finn, throwing stones in the midst of battle, was strange enough. But Enkrid seemed even more bizarre. There was something awkward about him, a strange feeling poking at Torres's heart. It was hard to describe in words, but it just felt odd. Extremely, very extremely odd.
Why?
If you think about it, everything is odd, but if I had to pick a few things.
Firstly, his skill.
Torres didn't want to face the lycanthropes, intoxicated by the moonlight right now. Not alone. While he might win, there's also a chance of dying. If he tried to stab a lycanthrope in the neck with a dagger and got caught by its claws.
Ugh.
The thought gave him goosebumps. It was an unnecessary worry. So what about Enkrid?
Is his heart made of stone?
His boldness seemed to go beyond just courage. He showed incredible agility, dodging between the enemy soldiers and lycanthropes, who were already agitated, and he killed the enemy commander with a single blow.
He also swiftly dealt with the one-eyed lycanthrope.
After striking the lycanthrope's claws a few times with his sword, he beheaded it. His skill was so precise and fluid it almost made Torres's stomach turn. As he spun, his sword seemed to whip around like a lash. Who is this guy?
Ah,
Torres finally recognized the difference between the Enkrid he had sparred with and the Enkrid he saw now.
the skill level is completely different.
He had noticed some awkwardness and clumsiness before. That's why he had advised Enkrid to fill in the gaps by fighting more, thinking it would help. Now, Enkrid seemed to have reached a level of mastery. At least his spinning slash looked that way.
In just a few days.
Was he a genius? No, Torres knew better from spending time with him. Enkrid's natural talent for using his body was just average. To be honest, it was almost embarrassing to compare him to others, as he was rather clumsy.
Wow, this is something else.
Now every swing of his sword could kill a person or creature. Even after killing the commander and the one-eyed lycanthrope, lycanthropes and enemy soldiers occasionally targeted Enkrid. But with a few steps and a steady downward slash, he cracked skulls. His deliberate horizontal slashes didn't just cut through armor, they delivered crushing blows that shattered ribs and internal organs. Even if the blade didn't penetrate directly, the impact was still devastating. It was a clear demonstration of what a heavy sword technique could do.
Aren't they scared of him?
If Enkrid were the enemy, Torres would be terrified to fight him. And it wasn't just Torres who felt this way. With the commander and lycanthrope leader dead, and a few more casualties among their ranks, no one dared to challenge Enkrid. Even the lycanthropes, intoxicated by the full moon and lost in a frenzy, began to ignore Enkrid entirely. They saw him and passed by, avoiding him.
I'd do the same.
With that, only the battle between the enemy soldiers and the lycanthropes remained, and that too was nearing its end. Enkrid stood alone, bathed in moonlight, quietly observing the rest of the fight. It didn't seem awkward at all. In fact, his composed demeanor under the moonlight felt strangely fitting as he caught his breath and watched the battle unfold. At that moment, Torres felt a chill run down his spine. It was surprising enough to see lycanthropes and enemy soldiers avoiding a single human. But another question arose. A sense of unease continued to bother Torres.
Let's say his skills are that good.
But what about this situation? There are too many strange things. Starting with the lycanthropes meeting with the Greyhound unit. They kept talking about something being behind the dog hole.
How did he know the commander's name?
That just doesn't make sense, does it? It couldn't simply be dismissed as a coincidence. Once doubt began to take hold, it tended to lead to more questions, and that was exactly what was happening to Torres. As they ran around the battlefield, Torres kept repeating how strange everything was.
What's going on?
Finn asked, her eyes scanning the surroundings while they ran. She was assessing the battlefield. Regardless of who was left standing, they would have to sweep them all up. Initially, it seemed like the humans had the upper hand, but now it looked like the lycanthropes might win. The lycanthropes had been avoiding Enkrid like a plague, but the humans hadn't. They had targeted him several more times, which had led to even more casualties. This whole situation had been created by one person, Enkrid, a platoon leader of an independent platoon, a man with a graceful body and a handsome face. Was he some kind of tactical genius? Finn thought so.
Everything just feels off.
Torres muttered beside him as they ran. They seemed close, but there was something Torres didn't understand. Something that made him uneasy as he looked at Enkrid with a puzzled expression.
Focus, we need to deal with the remaining ones.
Finn said as she threw an axe from her waist. Just after locking eyes with an enemy soldier, the axe spun through the air and struck the soldier in the chest with a thud. The hit soldier took a step back and then collapsed.
That must hurt, bastard.
Finn muttered as she ran. Torres, running beside her, kept murmuring about how strange everything was. Eventually, they reached Enkrid. It had taken some time to go around, but they had kept within visual range, as instructed.
I need to ask you something.
Torres said. He needed to know what was going on, the reason behind all of this. Setting aside the mysterious improvement in Enkrid's skills, there was something more urgent.
How do you know the commander's name?
There was no plausible explanation for this. Enkrid was indifferent, as if to say, what's the big deal?
By coincidence.
Coincidence?
What were the chances of knowing the enemy commander's name by coincidence?
Kreis mentioned there was a strange guy among the enemy.
It was a lie, but could it be verified? No, and it sounded plausible.
Oh.
They mocked him for always hiding his head.
He wasn't a strong figure like a city-level champion, but he was the enemy, and his odd behavior had made him somewhat notorious. It's possible to hear such rumors through various channels. In Aspen, some people knew the name of the border defense captain, so it's possible it could happen.
Then you planned this situation, right?
Of course not. Who could have predicted the lycanthrope pack would show up here?
His eyes seemed to say.
Why ask something so obvious?
That annoyed Torres greatly.
Is that really important? I suddenly have an idea.
Finn, thinking Enkrid might be a tactical genius, listened intently. Torres found Enkrid's casual tone strange, but he also listened. They had to hear him out.
Let's scale the wall. Right now, no one would expect someone to climb over it.
The escape through the hole was clearly a trap set by the enemy. If they managed to sneak back into the city before the enemy soldiers returned.
Brilliant.
Finn agreed first. It seemed plausible. It made sense. The plan had been developed through repeated trials of this day. If it seemed unpolished, that would be strange.
All right.
Torres clicked his tongue but had to agree. After all, the plan was still in motion, and what Enkrid suggested seemed like a sharp dagger that could strike the enemy without them even knowing.
Let's go.
And so, before the fight between the lycanthropes and the enemy soldiers had even ended, the three of them moved.
Shit, they're fleeing.
A soldier who had just thrust his spear into a lycanthrope's head shouted. But they couldn't chase after them. The remaining soldiers numbered only 12. They could still form a formation, but to be honest, none of them wanted to face the person who had just killed Commander Roger.
Damn it.
And so all they could do was curse under their breath.
It seems like it'll work.
Finn, standing before the fortress wall, sensed that the vigilance was noticeably weaker than before. Although she hadn't reached the level of the Gate of Sixth Sense, she still had the instincts of a ranger and pathfinder. Following behind her, Torres doubted if they were on the right path, but shook his head inwardly.
Now's not the time to hesitate.
Once decided, they must go through with it. He was also a member of the Border Guard and a soldier rated as a special class in the Narilia military ranking system. While not capable of taking on 100 men alone, he was a valuable asset capable of handling 2 or 3 opponents by himself. And then there was Enkrid.
I'll go first.
He didn't wait for Finn to take the lead. He swiftly climbed the wall, placing his hands in the crevices. He had discarded his tattered gambeson, and even though he had used some throwing weapons, the long sword hanging at his waist remained.
What's up with him?
Finn, a ranger herself, couldn't help but notice that Enkrid climbed the wall better than she did.
I don't know. Just follow him.
What?
Torres realized his words sounded strange as he repeated them.
I thought I knew a bit about him before, but now I don't. Anyway, just keep up.
Enkrid's pace up the wall was rapid and graceful, almost like a work of art. It was as if he put monkeys to shame. Without hesitation, he moved his hands and feet smoothly. Finn followed closely behind. Rushing up, she only had 2 stakes left to secure on the wall. Looking down, Finn saw Torres struggling to keep up, but managing nonetheless. He was a physically capable individual.
What about him?
Finn looked up again. Enkrid had almost reached the top of the wall, crouching beneath the battlements. The battlements were thick and tall structures designed for defense, making it difficult to climb over without skill.
Can he not climb that?
It didn't seem likely. For Finn, she could just hang by her fingertips, pull herself up, and use her waist's momentum to get over. It would be even easier if she hooked a small grappling hook she carried. Once over, she could help her comrades by pulling them up. Regardless, it didn't seem like Enkrid was stuck because he couldn't get over the battlements. Hanging beneath the battlements, Enkrid didn't look fatigued. He looked down and wiggled his fingers. It was a simple hand signal, but its meaning was clear. Guards. There were guards on the other side of the wall. Finn, however, didn't sense any sounds or movements.
Is he more sensitive than me, a ranger?
In reality, Enkrid wasn't sensing anything either. It was simply experience guiding him. Hanging beneath the battlements, Enkrid pondered.
What kind of tricks are they up to?
Blocking the sixth sense. This was the one thing that even after countless repetitions of today, Enkrid couldn't figure out. It was certain that some spell was at work, otherwise it wouldn't be so peaceful. In the small passage, they were already inside the tunnel. Feeling a sense of unease meant it was already too late. Even if they had missed the pack of lycanthropes because this land, specifically in front of Cross Guard, was a place where monsters constantly roamed. Had they not noticed the presence of troops hidden above the wall? Clearly some trick was at play. Up to the 60th iteration of today, he had tried to figure out what that trick was.
Let's leave it.
It was a matter of importance. There were more crucial matters than the trick the wizard used, and his ultimate goal was clear: surviving today, training during that time. Thus, moving forward with the sword as their guide, was it a problem if they gave up trying to figure it out? There was absolutely no problem. From what he had learned through repeating today,
It should be around here.
Enkrid, still hanging from the battlements, moved slowly to the left. To hang on, there needed to be crevices in the wall. The walls of Cross Guard were frequently under attack by not just regular monsters, but sometimes even monster colonies. As a result, there were many nicks and scratches. Although repairs had been made, many crevices remained. With fingers hooked in the gaps and toes wedged in, it wasn't difficult for him to move. As Enkrid moved along the wall, he mentally pictured what lay beyond it. At first, he could only predict and guess, but now he could even guess the location of the wizard Resha. No, it was a certainty. This arrogant wizard had never left his position in any of the repeated toe days. Having found his position, Enkrid sent another hand signal, "You go first." Seeing the signal, Finn and Torres began to move. Finn went first, followed by Torres. Finn, hanging from the battlements, reached out to help Torres. As soon as they both crossed over, a bright light illuminated above them. It must have been 7 or 8 torches being lit simultaneously. It wasn't an unfamiliar sight.
How did you get here? Surely my minions were moving.
Resha's voice, as expected, it was just beyond the wall. She didn't know him, but he knew her location. That alone gave him an advantageous position. He also knew her name and the spells she used.
Damn it.
Torres cursed.
It's real.
Finn muttered, prompting Enkrid to reach out. Grasping the edge of the battlement with his fingertips, he pulled himself up with just one arm. It was a testament to the strength that had impressed his squad members, including Rem. Moreover, the repeated practice of the isolation technique made his body feel lighter. With a swift motion, Enkrid lifted himself and flipped over the battlement, rolling through the air. This acrobatic move, which once would have been impossible for him, was now within his capabilities thanks to his training. He spun in the air and landed on the ground, knees bent, his impact resonating with a thud. Right before him stood the wizard Resha, her eyes wide with surprise. "You," she began to say, but before she could continue, Enkrid moved. A high-pitched whistle cut through the air, a whistle dagger. Resha was startled but not panicked. She wondered where it had come from, confident in her defense. She had an invisible barrier around her, created by her magic, a shield that could block even a quarrel shot point-blank. As she waited for the dagger to strike her barrier, Enkrid's whistle dagger was aimed not at her, but at the 4 soldiers with crossbows behind her. The whistle daggers, guided by Enkrid's focus point technique, hit its mark precisely. His training had paid off. The 4 enemy soldiers fell, collapsing just as Resha reacted.
Huh.
She let out a strange cry, and thorny vines shot up from the ground, whipping around to strike at him. The real fight was just beginning.
Take out the soldiers first.
Enkrid drew his sword and shouted. He swung the drawn sword, his head feeling hot from intense concentration.
Cut through the thin ones, deflect the thick ones.
Enkrid moved with the principles of light sword techniques, not relying on the heavy sword techniques he usually practiced, although he had never formally trained in this style.
It's good to know the basic principles of a swordsmanship. Sticking to just one style like heavy sword techniques is foolish. You need to understand your opponent's techniques to counter and fight effectively.
Ragna, usually lazy and showing enthusiasm only when it was time to teach, had said this during one of his rare passionate moments. From that day, Enkrid had learned the basic principles of various sword techniques. He had practiced against thorny vines over 70 times. And now, on the 71st repetition of this day, his efforts were paying off. He cut the thinner vines and deflected the thicker ones. Slash, crackle, thud. Some of the thorny vines were as thick as an arm, hitting with the force of a club. Enkrid blocked them with the flat of his sword and diverted them upwards, maintaining a low stance. This was the light sword technique in action.
You bastard.
Resha was furious. How dare he evade her vines, a mere swordsman? She moved her hands, summoning several thorny spears and whips. Enkrid didn't rely on vague instincts. Instead, he focused intensely, feeling as if all his concentration was centered in his eyes. His eyes felt like they were burning. In this state, he could see everything, as if each movement was slow. He repeated his actions, deflecting, swinging, parrying, and cutting. Feelings? He discarded them. Sixth sense? It wasn't necessary now. There was no need to rely on instincts. He could see everything, strike, dodge, and counter. While dodging and deflecting 2 more vine attacks, he heard anguished cries around him, the dying gasps of soldiers. Torres and Finn's skills were not to be underestimated. Especially with distractions, Torres's abilities shone. He was skilled with daggers, something Enkrid had witnessed firsthand.
Fine, I'll make you dance until you die.
he muttered, ready to continue the fight. Resha held her anger inside, her eyes shining with a snake-like at Enkrid. Enkrid ignored her. Hadn't he seen this many times before? The heart of the beast pounded as if speaking to him. No, it was Rem. It felt like he could hear Rem's voice.
If you're going to get caught by that, you might as well rip out that heart.
Don't worry, crazy Rem, I'm not going to get caught by something like that. When he didn't flinch, even in the face of her death glare, the wizard's vines grew fiercer. They became thinner and faster. Whiz. Up to now, most of Resha's vines had taken the form of spears or whips, but when pushed to the current situation, they took on the form of arrows. Though not actual arrows, their thickness and the way they shot towards him were like that of arrows. Could a human block a shower of arrows?
No.
Not unless they were a knight, that is, but if one had to. If there came a moment when one had to fend off a rain of arrows, if it was utterly unavoidable, what should be done?
What else?
You brace yourself and prepare for it. Call it a soldier's spirit, or perhaps an infantryman's spirit. No, it was simply who Enkrid was. There was no giving up, no regrets. He had staked his entire life on the path forward. Gripping his sword tightly with both hands, Enkrid focused, feeling a sharp pain in his eyes.
Connect the dots.
Based on the lines connecting these points, he deflected them all. Thin, twisted vines shot up from below, raining down from all directions. The moment he confirmed that there were more than 10, he stopped counting. Enkrid dispersed his concentration around himself. It was a technique he had realized amidst the pack of lycanthropes and the Greyhound unit, dispersing concentration. With it, he could evade attacks entering his range. From the previous fight in the small tunnel, he also learned something: instantaneous judgment. In every situation, acting without hesitation in the moment. Enkrid combined the two and executed his moves. Soon, the air in front of him was filled with torn vines, spilling green sap everywhere. Resha's forehead veins bulged, and her eyes were bloodshot. The vines didn't stop. Nor did Enkrid's sword. Finn and Torres, who were fighting the soldiers, glanced at the steen. It seemed that simply saying Enkrid fought well wasn't enough anymore. Torres thought this as he approached a soldier from behind and slit his throat. A quarrel bolt flew into the spot where the soldier had been standing, embedding itself in the dead man's belly.
Why don't you aim more carefully?
Crack. Ah, at that moment a scream came from the side. It was Finn's doing, moving across the ground like a snake. A soldier, his leg twisted in an unnatural direction, was foaming at the mouth. Finn didn't stop. Stopping would mean getting hit by a quarrel. Meanwhile, the battle between Enkrid and the wizard continued, with no one able to approach the two. Sharp, thorny vines shot out like needles, occasionally bouncing off and hitting the surrounding walls. No one wanted to be killed by their own wizard's hand, so they all kept their distance. This gave Torres and Finn a brief respite. Seeing the sharp, thorny vines piercing the walls, Torres had no desire to get closer either.
Is killing the soldiers really going to solve anything?
Torres realized that the outcome of this fight depended on the duel between Enkrid and the wizard. If the wizard won, Torres and Finn would also be dead. But how long could Enkrid hold out? Both Torres and Finn could see that Enkrid was constantly in danger. Up until now, he had been dodging the vines, but they had started to graze him. In sync with this,
Did you charge in relying on the leather scraps you're wearing?
the wizard's voice taunted, calm and confident, believing she had the upper hand. This isn't good, thought Torres, and he was right. Enkrid was in continuous peril. He was quickly reaching his limit. However, this was the moment Enkrid had been waiting for. With Resha confident of her victory, and everyone, including Torres, Finn, and the enemy soldiers, focused on the duel, Enkrid made his move. His right hand, which had been gripping the sword with both hands, moved. It was his decisive move. Enkrid gazed into the eyes of his opponent wizard, Resha.
Even a wizard has eyes.
He also has a nose and a mouth. In other words, he's human.
Every human has reflexive actions.
Jackson's teachings suddenly came to mind, something prepared accordingly. Enkrid only needed to stop the raging thorn vines for a moment, a method to achieve that, a hidden card up his sleeve, something he had practiced several times before. He had trained enough. The important thing was timing, so right now, while wielding and deflecting with his sword using only his left hand, one of the thorn vines struck his left wrist with a thud. The leather gauntlet, obtained from a sewer corpse enthusiast, was torn to shreds. At that moment, Enkrid raised his right hand high. Resha's eyebrow twitched at the gesture. Having shown the use of throwing weapons several times, this reaction was expected. Resha thought there would be no problem regardless of what was thrown. After all, wasn't she surrounded by a magical barrier that blocks most physical forces? But instead of a dagger, a stone flew towards her, a thin, crystal-like orb. Flash! A sudden burst of light, incomparable to a torch. Everyone, including Resha, who reflexively looked at the object Enkrid's throw, was momentarily blinded. For a very brief moment, they lost their vision.
Hup.
Enkrid, who had been waiting for this moment while looking only at the ground, moved. The shining stone obtained from the sewers was hidden up his sleeve. He had struggled to figure out how to activate it. He didn't know it would be used this way. The technique of hiding and throwing a weapon was called the hide knife. Showing an empty hand was intended to lure the opponent into complacency, and it worked perfectly. All these factors combined to create a momentary opening as thin as paper. For Enkrid, that was enough. He charged forward, a technique he learned from watching a squire one day. Crouching low, he rushed forward, gripping his sword with both hands and raising it high. Shifting his weight from his back foot to his front, he brought the sword down in a powerful vertical slash. At that moment, Resha, whose vision had just returned, screamed.
Kya.
That was her final scream, her dying words. Swoosh, clang. Resha's barrier shattered, a vertical slash executed with full force, without regard for the consequences. Resha's head was caught in it. As the blade broke through the barrier, it veered off course, peeling off her scalp, severing an ear, and splitting her collarbone before exiting below. In the end, the blade cut through part of her intestines and about 30% of her upper body, emerging around her waist. With a thud, a chunk of flesh, including one of her severed arms, fell to the ground. Standing vacantly, the wizard became a half-dead figure, pouring her entrails and blood onto the ground. What could someone so grievously wounded say? The light in her eyes quickly dimmed. It was clear what she wanted to do in her final moments. A few thorny vines behind Enkrid writhed before losing strength and falling. Enkrid finally exhaled the breath he had been holding. He knew that Resha's barrier would shatter if it took enough impact. For instance, a weighted strike could easily break it. The dagger had been ignored, but Finn's axe had affected it. In reality, it was a culmination of everything he had learned, applied in one moment. He had even hidden the shining stone using the hide knife technique.
Aren't you going to finish up?
Enkrid said, snatching the glowing stone that hovered in the air. This light would soon alert the city within the walls, causing a commotion. It meant they didn't have much time. Finn moved first, followed by Torres. There weren't many soldiers left.
Arg.
The dying screams of the soldiers echoed above the city walls. The moonlight still shone on Enkrid. Even the enemy soldiers, along with Torres and Finn, saw the moonlight shining like a halo from Enkrid's back. He gave off a different aura, not that of a typical human. The scent of blood and roses mingled atop the wall. It was a strange smell, so unique it could have been mistaken for a newly released perfume. Once over and down the wall, it was Finn's domain. As if she had been prepared, she hugged the inner side of the wall, dug up a part of the ground, and pulled out a bundle.
Supplies for emergencies.
Inside, it seemed like supplies prepared by the spy known as the Cat. Inside the bundle, a filthy blanket appeared. She immediately tossed it to Enkrid and Torres. While Enkrid and Torres covered themselves with the blanket, at the edge of the slum near the city wall, Finn twisted the necks of two nearby beggars out of curiosity. Watching her skill in subduing them silently, one could only think,
As expected of Finn.
After all, they had seen her do this countless times during their repeated cycles. Finn's mastery of Enkrid-style martial arts was like a ripened fruit, akin to that of a seasoned expert. Most of the slum's inhabitants paid no attention to their surroundings, so there were no more witnesses. Thus, the three of them hid within the darkness and under the filthy blanket. As Enkrid followed, he fell into his thoughts. It was a recurring thought, a routine reflection of the day. When repeating today, Enkrid had 3 paths before him. So, was it enough to choose and break through one of those paths?
Do I really need to choose just one?
With the tension off his shoulders, he saw things more clearly. Instead of choosing just one path, he could utilize all 3 barriers. It seemed possible. At the Greyhound's escape route, he could experience being surrounded by elite troops. Fighting against the horde of lycanthropes, he could learn to fight and evade in the chaotic battles. And Raisha, with her rose vines, was an excellent training tool. Enkrid saw the Greyhounds, the lycanthropes, and Raisha all as training tools. They were good teaching aids. Enkrid had crafted today in this way.
It wasn't bad.
His wrist hurt a bit from the blow to the left gauntlet. He trusted his leather armor to absorb the hits from attacks he couldn't completely avoid. But there were no fatal wounds.
Shh! Keep your head down, it's a patrol!
At Finn's words, Enkrid lowered his head and pretended to be asleep. Their disguise was complete with some of their equipment hidden and a filthy blanket covering them.
The smell is driving me crazy. Bear with it. Don't you know there's chaos on the city walls? They might have hidden here. Then why don't we just sweep this place? Shh. What if they all attack us?
Listening to the patrolling soldiers' conversation, Enkrid squinted his eyes.
All right, let's move.
Finn led Enkrid and Torres without hesitation, as if she knew the way well. As they walked, Enkrid lifted his head, catching a glimpse of the city. In the distance he saw a tall bell tower, dirt roads, faint lights shining from within, but mostly dark alleys. As Enkrid followed Finn, she fell back to walk beside Torres, when Torres gave her a look as if to ask what she was doing.
Are all border guard soldiers like that?
Huh?
Are they all that capable?
Finn gestured behind them with her thumb. Behind them was Enkrid. Torres pondered Finn's question for a moment. A swordsman like that? One who could deflect a wizard's bizarre thorn vines with a sword, not a shield. Creating an opening and cutting through. A swordsman who, after being taught a few times, could use his specialty, the hide knife, in a unique way. One who could evade and endure between lycanthropes and elite enemies, putting his life on the line. Ultimately, a swordsman who could cut through the attacking opponents, dispatching lycanthrope swarms and elite soldiers alone. Torres thought about the top fighters in the border guard. Let's see. Eisen? Barney? Hayun? No way. Purely in terms of skill, it felt like he had crossed a line.
Could there be? Huh? Could there be more monsters like that just everywhere?
It was a truly strange feeling. Not long ago, Enkrid was under his command. Even during their training, they seemed well matched. But now everything has changed. His mastery, his swordplay had evolved.
Sigh.
Finn sighed in mixed admiration and bewilderment at Torres' response. Look at what Enkrid had done.
Is this a platoon leader? Just a platoon leader?
She wondered what would happen if she reported this upon returning. While searching the area for the hidden cipher left by the cat, she worried whether anyone would believe what Enkrid had done. As they navigated through the shadows, avoiding patrols with the help of moonlight, the commotion on the city walls quieted down. Enkrid found the silence more ominous. Having dealt with the wizard, his instincts seemed to be kicking in. But if he relied too much on them, he might end up in trouble again. After all, they had used all 3 barriers to cross the city walls. He wanted to face tomorrow with this intact, so he stayed vigilant, alert and ready to react immediately to any trouble. Finn continued to search until morning. The 3 of them felt the fatigue but encountered no trouble. The commotion that began on the city walls didn't spread into the city. On the contrary, it seemed to be hushed up. As they hid around a corner, they overheard 2 patrol soldiers passing by on the main road, confirming this.
Did something happen last night? I heard someone cross the city walls. Shh, we were ordered not to talk about it. Don't get yourself into trouble and lose pay over loose talk.
As the 2 patrolmen moved away, Finn muttered from behind.
This isn't good.
Why?
Torres asked.
The connection's gone, the cat is dead.
Does that mean this was a wild goose chase?
Torres asked, but Finn shook her head.
The message was left, but it's, well,
How so?
In a corner of the alley, Finn sighed and said,
There's a designated spot in front of the city gate. It's buried there.
Why in front of the city gate?
Torres questioned.
It must have been urgent. If they failed in their escape, it would be the last place they'd go.
This was a headache. Torres nudged Enkrid and asked,
Any good ideas?
We retrieve the item from in front of the gate and then leave. Isn't that the plan?
That won't be easy.
Is this really such a difficult decision? Enkrid thought as he looked at the 2.
Their minds are stuck.
It was understandable, given everything that had happened overnight. Enkrid wasn't aware of it, but his actions had startled both of them. His swordsmanship and the boldness to turn every situation to his advantage were what he had shown yesterday.
Let's set a fire.
What?
We'll set a fire under cover of night and escape. On the way, we'll grab the item. The fact that they don't want anyone talking about what happened on the wall suggests they're waiting for any intruders to make a move. So, let's give them one.
Finn's eyes lit up. It was a brilliant plan. At the same time, she thought, I should have suggested that first. She realized her mind had been stuck, and that was enough for her. Finn was an excellent ranger, and a good ranger often became a serious troublemaker, at least from the enemy's perspective. The three of them stayed hidden until nightfall, then set fire to a pile of hay in front of an inn. They set fires in 6 different places, spreading out to do it simultaneously. Finn was the most excited. Her feet were quick, her hands agile, and she shouted about the fire first, causing even more confusion among the people. With the fire blazing behind them, Enkrid moved through the darkness, thinking, it seems like we resort to arson quite often. He felt he might end up becoming an arsonist rather than a knight. Setting fires seemed to be becoming a habit, but that wasn't the issue at hand. He grabbed a torch and practically ran, throwing it onto the hay, along with an oil bottle he had taken from the inn. The fire burned brightly. He felt like he was becoming not just an arsonist, but an arsonist expert, though the results were effective.
Fire! There's a fire!
The sky had been cloudy all day, suggesting spring rain was coming, but it hadn't happened yet. So the hay and straw burned well. The nearby wooden buildings also caught fire easily. When they knocked over a few torches, the flames roared fiercely. As all attention was drawn to the blaze, Finn, Torres, and Enkrid slipped away quietly. It happened just before the city gate closed. Of course, Finn dug up the ground to retrieve the hidden message.
Looks like we can head back now?
Torres said. Finn and Enkrid nodded. It was time to return.
How did you know the wizard's name?
On their way back, Torres asked. Enkrid had expected the question and gave his prepared response.
It was a lucky guess. It was the name of a female wizard who had killed many of my comrades during my mercenary days, so I just blurted it out.
Could anyone really believe that? The explanation seemed so implausible that it somehow made sense. Torres felt puzzled, but soon decided not to worry about it.
Whatever.
As long as everything ended well, that was all that mattered. It was the attitude of a good soldier. Avner couldn't help but chuckle. Sitting in his office within the cross guard, he kept breaking into incredulous laughter.
Everything breached. In one night?
They had captured an enemy spy and extracted information. They set a trap based on that. They even leaked false information, posing as spies. He thought that if anyone tried to enter, they would be dealt with. Even then, he hadn't really expected anyone to infiltrate the cross guard, and yet,
The elite soldiers at the escape route were almost wiped out.
Resha was dead. She wasn't supposed to die here. Resha of the Thorn Vines was a well-known wizard.
The road ahead is difficult, but I could understand if a knight had appeared.
But that wasn't the case. They tried to capture whoever had caused the commotion. He was prepared to use his own troops if necessary. But while they were waiting, a fire broke out. They had considered all possibilities, including an assassination attempt. And all that happened was a fire. After that, there was no trace of the infiltrators.
Did they just set a fire and leave?
Avner continued to laugh. It was absurd and baffling. His mouth was laughing, but his eyes were not. A strange expression. The genius strategist of Aspen, that's what they called him, and yet he had been completely outmaneuvered. How could he not laugh?
Achoo!
On the way back to the border guard base, Finn thought Enkrid was definitely crazy when he suggested another round of training. Torres politely declined.
Aren't you tired? I am.
When they arrived at the border guard base, Enkrid saw a strange scene. A shabby, bald man, who could easily be mistaken for a beggar, was complaining to a soldier. It was a sight that made Enkrid involuntarily tilt his head in curiosity. Finn and Torres went in, first because of the report. Torres will handle the overall report, and Finn will assist with the rest. Enkrid just needed to report his return. So they stood in front of the quarters. An unexpected figure appeared. It was Gilpin. His clothes were torn here and there, and his face was bruised blue. One eye was half swollen, seemingly in the process of healing, and he was limping. It didn't seem like his leg was broken.
Let me take a look.
A quick glance revealed that his ankles seemed to be sprained.
I'm fine.
Gilpin said, though there was a subtle anxiety in his tone. Enkrid nodded.
What happened?
This was under Kreis's jurisdiction. Obviously, something had happened with the Gilpin Guild for him to end up in this state.
I'm here. For what?
That frog bastard who was with the former guildmaster.
Ah, Frog. There was no need to search his memory. Yes, they had said that Frog would come when spring arrived. It seemed he had come now, but wasn't it a bit early?
Start from the beginning.
He wanted to hear the full story first. If Kreis had died or if there was an urgent matter, Gilpin wouldn't be here talking, but would have immediately insisted they go together. Kreis had already been eating and sleeping in the city for 6 days. Spending about a week outside the camp was part of Kreis's routine. Moreover,
Isn't there a battle coming up?
so much to prepare for. Starting from the beginning of the year, from food to various errands, many people sought out Kreis, not just soldiers but even officers. Because of that, there were many who provided such conveniences. It had been 6 days like that. He wanted to wrap up all the tasks before the upcoming deployment. Most importantly, since taking over the Gilpin Guild, counting kronas had become more enjoyable. With this, why would he want to return to the unit?
Let's see, how much will I make today?
He would need a lot of kronas to start a salon later, so it was best to earn as much as possible while he could. Recently, he had received a decent commission from the items the squad leader brought and sold.
I wonder if he'll find something else like that.
Well, there was talk of a wizard living hidden in the sewers. Would such things happen frequently?
It's time for lunch. Let's eat.
Around noon, Kreis called for Gilpin to settle lunch. For lunch, they had a dish made from ground whole wheat. Somehow, they had managed to make thin noodles and top them with olive oil and tomato sauce. It was reasonably good.
So did you seal off the basement of that shoemaker's shop?
Kreis asked, clattering his fork.
It's all sealed up now.
Gilpin replied after swallowing the noodles he was chewing. The idea was to play the role of night guards, if not full-fledged guardians. Thus, the Gilpin Guild took action in areas beyond the reach of the reserve forces. The sealing off of the shoemaker's basement was one such task. The reserve forces didn't concern themselves with such matters. They had taken all they could but left the tunnels. Of course, the squad leader had already looted them before that. Anyway, what was the role of the Night Watch? It was to give the impression of protecting the city's residents, aside from shaking down transient visitors. The effectiveness? Needless to say, it was great, whether collecting tributes or arranging protection fees. Especially when gathering information, it was as if the entire city's populace became Kreis's ears.
If we push, we might even weed out all the spies from Aspen.
It seemed possible if the Gilpin Guild absorbed the surrounding guilds, but it still felt too early to make a move. Kreis paused eating, lost in thought, mulling over his plans.
Bind them through the squad leader.
If the squad leader moved, it would give the squad members a reason to act. Since each squad member's desires were clear, enticing them wouldn't be difficult.
And how many people are we managing?
Even in the border guard, there was a slum. While some had given up on life and were languishing there, others were struggling to survive.
Recruit some from the slums.
Absorbing smaller members while breaking down other guilds. Kreis was confident in his ability to read people, if nothing else. Perhaps it was because he had grown up learning the hard way. During his begging days, he could tell at a glance who would give him something if he asked. Of course, it took hundreds of beatings to develop that sense. The moment he realized that approaching the wrong person could get him killed, his instincts naturally sharpened.
It seems doable.
Should he call it the Back Alley Guild integration operation? In a year or maybe less than 6 months if the foundation was laid, he felt he could completely dominate the back alleys. If the plan went smoothly. However, there were always variables in any plan. That was the variable. They say fortune and misfortune come unexpectedly. It was the same for Kreis. Someone burst into the mansion's drawing room, breaking down the door. It was a figure draped in a thick cloak. Kreis didn't think about how they got here or ask who they were. There were about a dozen guild members guarding the mansion. 2 of them who were guarding the door were lying on the floor.
Is there blood?
There was no pool of blood on the floor, so they didn't seem to be dead. At least it looked that way. Kreis quickly assessed the situation and the sudden misfortune, recognizing and accepting it. His keen mind was racing, and his eyes scanned the surroundings.
Yes, come this way.
This was his first statement after making his judgment.
Do you know who I am? Your reaction is refreshing.
The figure inside the cloak shrugged, causing the cloak to sway. The voice was rough and raspy, as if the speaker had injured vocal cords.
It didn't seem relevant.
You've got a good sense.
As the figure spoke, they removed the cloak. Inside the smoothly flowing cloak, the person was wearing armor reinforced with metal plates around the chest area. Heart armor. It's difficult for humans to recognize Frog's appearance. Even so, Gilpin recognized the figure. The white scar on the neck revealed it was Frog, the harbinger of death that Gilpin often mentioned.
Isn't it too early?
Hadn't they said he wouldn't come until long after spring had arrived?
Where's the guy who was here before?
He got bored of this place and went up ahead.
Kreis responded casually to Frog's words. Gilpin was drenched in a cold sweat. One wrong word, and he might be sent up as well. The fear of death loomed. It was the threat of an overwhelming power disparity. In this situation,
Would you like some food?
Kreis asked nonchalantly. Frog twisted his lips into a grin.
You're a funny guy.
With that, Frog moved, and Gilpin tried to resist but was beaten. It ended with 3 blows. If Frog had not held back and drawn his weapon, it would have been over in 1 strike. Kreis didn't resist but still got hit.
Humans only listen after they've been beaten. That's my philosophy. Who's the one who killed the former guildmaster?
After the beating, Frog lifted Kress by the collar with one hand and asked. Kress's mind raced. Who among the squad members could handle this monster? Rem, Ragna, Audin, Jackson. Which name should he mention? Who should he direct Frog to find? The decision was made without hesitation, having already considered this when he saw Frog.
I would have told you if you had just asked.
I don't like that. I prefer to beat people up first, and then listen.
Crazy Frog bastard. Despite what he thought inside, Kreis responded with a smile.
I see the Border Guard Reserve unit killed him. The name is Ragna.
And why are you sitting here?
I'm acting as the guildmaster.
Interesting. Hey, Baldy.
Gilpin, who had been knocked out in an instant, didn't even know how he was taken down. He just knew his eye socket hurt terribly, and his thigh was numb, making it impossible to stand.
Yes.
Bring Ragna here, and I'll let this guy go.
Frog said, causing Gilpin to look at Kreis.
Go ahead, bring our real guildmaster.
Gilpin was quick on the uptake. Frog wanted them to bring someone capable of killing him. Frog wasn't a fool. Even if he couldn't distinguish between lies and the truth, he could tell that this small, pretty human man was up to something. Frog made up his mind.
Kill that guy.
And chain this one. Since the one who originally managed this place was dead, it was time for a new manager. Contacting the homeland would take too much effort, so he decided it was better to manage things locally. And if things went south, escaping wouldn't be difficult.
How many days has it been since Kreis was captured?
Enkrid scratched his nose and asked.
3 days. What about my squad members, conveniently? They're all headed to the battlefield. Even Rem? I'm not sure. I only heard that he's not here. Have you confirmed Big Eyes is alive? Just reported on it a moment ago. Did they break all his limbs?
What?
Never mind. If they left his limbs intact, that's better.
Enkrid muttered to himself, nodded and stood up. Enkrid and Gilpin had been squatting in a corner near the front of the unit, talking. Gilpin looked up at the standing Enkrid, puzzled. Shouldn't they be rushing to rescue Kreis? Enkrid spoke again.
First, I'll go report my return. Should I wait? No, Frog is at the mansion, right? Aren't we going right now?
Right now? It didn't seem necessary. If Frog had wanted to kill Kreis, he would have done it already. But the fact that he hadn't even broken Kreis's limbs in 3 days meant
he must be holding on.
It was clear what Kreis was aiming for. He wanted to call for someone from his squad, which is why he mentioned the name Ragna. He could have asked for Rem, Audin, or Jackson, but he specifically chose Ragna, who was the hardest to summon due to being notoriously poor, with directions and lazy. It meant he was asking for anyone to come.
The problem is I'm the only one left.
It was unexpected for Enkrid that all his squad members had headed to the battlefield without him. Kreis couldn't have predicted this either. The fact that the usually unruly squad members had listened to someone else and gone to the battlefield was surprising. Whoever took them must have been quite impressive. Managing them without bursting a blood vessel from the stress was a feat in itself.
Go back and tell them to wait just one more day.
Gilpin's face twisted in frustration at those words.
The guild master will die.
It was a natural reaction for Gilpin. He was content with his current life. Being a night watchman rather than a full-fledged protector suited him just fine. There were fewer troublesome matters, and it was peaceful. Yes, it was very peaceful. Chryse was keen on Cronus, but he was fair. That's why Gilpin wanted to maintain this peace. The Gilpin who once thought about fleeing if the guild shattered before Frog's arrival no longer existed. He now had something to protect.
We have to go,
he repeated, but Enkrid shook his head.
Go and tell them to wait just one more day. Ragna will come.
With that, Enkrid turned away. Gilpin still had no other options. He had to turn back. He had to deliver the message. If the situation wasn't conveyed, Frog would tear the guildmaster apart. Frog seemed more than capable of doing that. Gilpin took steps to restore the broken peace.
God, please.
He sought a deity he didn't even believe in. Enkrid headed inside the unit.
It's been a few days already. What's going on? No one would tell me anything.
The soldier guarding the entrance asked as Enkrid walked in.
Loyalty exists.
Enkrid thought of Gilpin and understood his situation. If the reserve forces had taken control of the back alley guild, it could have been disastrous, possibly even resulting in execution. So, he couldn't have spoken up. Despite that, he wanted to protect what he had, and that sentiment was clearly conveyed.
A damn situation.
Enkrid muttered as he headed inside the unit. Chryse wouldn't be killed just because another day passed. That was evident from the situation.
It doesn't seem like Frog is a fool.
While Frog had a reputation for being straightforward and brute, like people, each frog was different. There were smart frogs, ignorant frogs, and even meticulous frogs. The same went for fairies, dragons, and giants. Of course, each species had its unique traits.
If there's time.
If there was no immediate need to go, Enkrid clenched and unclenched his fist as he walked. He wasn't naive. From this today, he had learned something.
I've improved.
Otherwise, he would have been killed by a lycanthrope or an enemy commander long ago. But he had even slain a wizard. This was evidence that his skills had improved. So could he handle Frog? Last time, when facing a tricky opponent, he was knocked out by a single kick to the side. So now?
It feels possible.
It wasn't baseless confidence. While Chryse had called for him instead of a squad member.
Frog, Frog, Frog.
Frog was a challenging opponent he'd like to face. For that, he needed preparation. Although he wasn't severely injured, he was fatigued, having stayed up for 2 nights. He had taken short naps on the way back and rested somewhat, but he wasn't in perfect condition. Therefore,
I need to report my return and rest first.
Enkrid did as he planned. If letting Chryse die wasn't an option, he would have to face Frog. It could be considered a troublesome task, but Enkrid felt a strange excitement about the situation.
Strange, very strange.
Normally, would he have been scared? No, rather than being scared, he would have fought even knowing he might lose. He couldn't stand by and watch his comrades die. Enkrid had always lived that way. However, if previously he had approached knowing he would lose, now he felt uncertain about the outcome, whether he would win or lose.
The company commander.
Upon entering the unit, he noticed many people were missing. There were also reports that the troublesome squad had been led out by the ferry company commander as the vanguard. He wondered who had taken them. Because of that, Enkrid had to report his return to a platoon leader from another company.
You're the only one left from the independent platoon, so will you be joining soon?
It was someone he was familiar with.
I'm exhausted, so I'll join in 2 days.
All right, but try to come quickly. There seem to be some issues at the front, and there might be a second deployment.
The platoon leader said, waving a dispatch and talking at length. Enkrid nodded and turned away. He unpacked in the empty quarters, soaked in hot water, and then fell asleep under a warm blanket. If he ended up facing Frog and died, repeating today, it was sleep to keep him in the best condition. Enkrid fell asleep quickly. It was a deep, restful sleep without dreams. Upon waking, Enkrid wiped the sleep from his eyes, washed his face, and ate meat for breakfast.
You're eating well for breakfast.
the cook on duty remarked, shaking his head. After chewing and swallowing the meat, he practiced the isolation technique. It was a good exercise for digestion and warming up the body. He then sharpened his longsword and counted his remaining whistling daggers. There were only 2 left. He hadn't been able to retrieve all the ones he had thrown.
Could that person make more for me?
Thinking of the city's blacksmith, Enkrid held the blade up diagonally in front of his eyes to inspect it. It was in good condition, no cracks. A few nicks, but nothing serious. The blacksmith had mentioned that blades could get chipped when cutting through a wizard, but it seemed to have held up well. Perhaps it varied from wizard to wizard. With all preparations complete, Nia!
Where have you been?
Esther appeared. Enkrid had thought she was gone as she hadn't been seen for a while.
Stay here, I'll be back soon.
With that, Enkrid stepped outside again. Esther seemed annoyed, as if questioning where he was going without her.
Want to come along? Just watch, though.
At Enkrid's words, Esther jumped into his arms, settling in comfortably. Feeling her warm body heat, Enkrid set off. His destination was the mansion where Krace was being held.